Just in time for the 2024 November election, Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott has said he has solved the border crisis. This comes after diverting billions of dollars of surplus away from education and other much-needed programs to paying for a brand new National Guard base in Eagle Pass, Texas. The Texas Republicans have spent billions of dollars on the border using National Guards and other forces from around the U.S. We talked with immigration attorney Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch. We started off asking her about Texas Republican Attorney General Ken Paxton's attacks on Latin organizations and the arrest of LULAC volunteers.
Yeah, we saw where the Attorney General in Texas, Ken Paxton, has gone on the attack again, targeting Latino organizations, saying that they're and mostly voter fraud is what he's trying to say, and that Latinos are trying to violate voting.
I think it's egregious what Ken Paxton and the state of Texas are doing. I mean, it shocks the conscience. And there's a reason that LULAC is asking the DOJ to investigate what they've done. Essentially, what Ken Paxton, Greg Abbott, the state of Texas, always want to try to prove that there's widespread voter fraud. They're always after that, and no one has ever found evidence of that, and yet they don't stop. And so what they've done in this instance is raid the homes of workers and volunteers for LULAC, which is a Latino organization that supports voter registration in the Latino population. And they actually, went to the homes of the volunteer workers and took them out of their homes in the middle of the night. One of them was an 87-year-old woman standing outside in her nightgown while men were standing around her with weapons, and they were searching her house looking for slips of voter, fraudulent voter registrations, because this woman's work is to go and find elderly voters and assist them in getting registered to vote. I mean, it's egregious, really, what they've done. It's beyond.
Are they using Texas Rangers or state troopers, or who are they using to do all this?
I don't know which law enforcement agency they would have utilized, but they would have needed a warrant, so some judge would have signed off on this, which is equally shocking. But again, it's the state of Texas, and some places you can find a judge to sign off on almost anything, and then any state law enforcement agency can be used to enforce a warrant, in this way. So I don't know which particular agency, but I wonder how those men felt standing outside surrounding this poor woman while they were looking in her house. I often wonder about that.
But with the presidential election, we saw Kamala Harris yesterday on her first interview stating on immigration that she pretty much be strong on immigration. Right.
Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, Harris on immigration is it's a big question mark. We don't know. We don't know how she's going to be. Absolutely, she must say that. She has to say, I'm going to be tough on immigration. And, frankly, any president would be tough on immigration. That's the deal. We have, over, I think it's $100 billion going to the Department of Homeland Security and enforcing the border. We are a nation that is tough on immigration, whatever party our president is in, and so she's going to say that. She's going to enforce our borders. But she also said at the convention that she intends to bring back the bipartisan bill that, was a compromise. I didn't love it as an immigration advocate myself, but it contained some better provisions, and that bill was killed by Donald Trump, actually. He called his supporters and said, you may not support this bill because any positive movement or collaboration on immigration was bad for him, and so he killed a bill that would have solved some problems.
And we've talked about this before, how illegal migrants coming across the border has dropped 30%, but yet there's still this image that or this fear that's being put out by most Republicans that our borders are being taken over.
Yeah, and it's been a little quiet on that front in the last few months, thankfully, and hopefully it stays that way up to the election, because fear is such a powerful motivator, and I know that A lot of people are afraid of immigration, what it means, and what drives that fear is a whole other topic and question. But the thing to keep in mind for everyone is that immigration is a good word. Not only is it, the way that this nation was formed and built and became so successful, but it's also the key to our next phase of growth and success as a nation. We need workers on all levels of the skill spectrum, and immigration is the solution to that. So we absolutely need, common sense immigration reform that supports the needs of this economy, and that creates jobs. It boosts the economy. It benefits everyone, and that is the truth that is supported by the data. And anyone who says otherwise is lying, and they, in my experience, tend to stand to gain something personally from telling lies like that.
Does it hurt the immigration advocacy when you have a situation like the two illegal immigrants from Venezuela charged with murder of a young girl? How much does that hurt the struggle for immigration reform?
Well, I mean, it's terrible when that happens. And I was just talking to a friend of mine yesterday who is Venezuelan. He's been in this country for many years, and he was just saying, I want everybody to know that's not us. That's not who we are. It's like you take a swath of people, of any people, Americans, anybody else, and there's going to be bad apples in the bunch. I mean, we're human beings. That's the way it functions. But unfortunately, the rhetoric of, the politicization of immigration is that when an immigrant commits a crime, it's splashed all over the media, and nobody talks about the fact that crime rates are way lower in the immigrant population than they are in the native-born citizen population. That headline doesn't solve the news. So, I mean, personally, whenever I see these headlines, I'm sad for the victims, and my immediate reaction is, oh, this is not helpful. It's not helpful to the pro-immigration cause.
What would a Trump administration, because he's talking about mass deportation, which I think may be illegal if you tried to do that. And that's being pushed by a number of Republicans now, that we need this.
Yeah, I mean, a Trump administration on immigration would be terrible. It would be horrific for us. And he has already said he would open up encampments within the interior of the United States and round up the immigrant population and deport them. Now, of course, there's due process that is required, going through the court system, et cetera, but whether he would follow that or break it and then be forced to follow it by the courts, very much remains. He separated families at the border, even though that was illegal, and, had to be told not to do that. So I think we can trust that atrocities would be committed under his watch, and illegal activities would take place against the immigrant community. It would be very, very, very bad for the immigrant community and the rest of us from an economic perspective, to have Trump enforcing immigration policy. He would be meaner and harsher than he was before, which is difficult to imagine, but that's what he's promised.
We also know that, we talked about this before. You hear people talk about the migrants coming over across the border to steal jobs. I heard that also. But I have heard nobody actually talk about enforcement of the companies that hire en masse, hire masses of illegal immigrants here, and are never charged, never prosecuted, never fined, really.
Yeah.
But you never hear about that.
No, you don't. I mean, and I think it's an interesting, exercise in cognitive dissonance. I remember this presentation I gave to a bunch of Republicans at one point, and we were talking about actually the voter issue, and one of the guys stood up and he was insisting that undocumented immigrants are all trying to vote, which has absolutely not been my experience. And he asked me, well, how do you know? And I said, well, I've worked with immigrants all day, every day. I talk to them all the time, and And then he said, well, I do too. I employ all the guys who work for me. It was documented. It was this moment where this person was just perfectly willing to announce that in front of a group of people, of Republican, anti-immigrant people, that his whole business is run by undocumented workers, and nobody batted an eyelash. Nobody went after him because they all have, people supporting them probably who are undocumented as well. And so there's just this hypocrisy amongst a lot of folks who are anti-immigrant but also depend upon immigrant labor to support their lives. And I think the key, though, with all of this, immigrants are stealing jobs rhetoric, which of course we've heard before over the centuries, is data. It's always back to the data. What does the economic data show us? Well, it shows us that immigration is a net benefit. So an immigrant who comes in and accepts or takes a job, they actually, on a macro level, create more work because of the way that they support the economy, and they tend to be more entrepreneurial. There's all sorts of statistics around that, and the work that they do creating businesses creates more employment. So from a big picture perspective, more immigrants actually means more jobs, and it's just a falsehood to say like, oh, an immigrant takes a job and that's a job that somebody, a native-born person would have worked, and there's the end of the answer. That's not how it functions in the real world.
I talked to organizations that work on the border. They were saying how the billions of dollars or billions of dollars that's spent on the border, they don't have, they have trouble with getting running water and just basic facilities that hasn't been fixed in years. But they just built a multi-million-dollar complex for the National Guards and people coming in to help the guards, so-called with enforcement. That's another hypocrisy that's been talked about too. They don't do anything.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, as a Texan, you think about, we pay a lot of taxes in Texas. We don't pay income taxes. We pay a lot of property taxes and sales taxes, and the fact that all of that money is going to this Operation Lone Star nonsense to the tune of, $60 billion plus, which doesn't even result in apprehensions at the border. It's literally wasted money, and yet, we have one of the worst educational systems in the nation, and our power grid is on the verge of collapse at any moment. And if you really spend some time looking at the expenditure of the state of Texas with immigration compared to the, just basic support of the needs of our citizens, it'll make smoke come out of your ears.
That was immigration attorney Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch.